Welcome, 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 everybody. This is the second podcast of the evening. I just finished one up with Andy Semichuk. I have Kerry Slone of WeTheFemale.net. Kerry, I met you at AmFest a few weeks ago. I was happy to take a picture. I was fortunate to take a picture. You're kind enough to take a picture with me, and you then I see it pops up, and we're gonna have a conversation. So thank you so much for accepting my invitation to join the Not Conscious family.
Oh, well, thank you for having me on. I'm glad to do it, and I'm looking forward to our chat.
So I know you on the X Space, the real SNS. Is that correct?
Yeah, my X space is definitely different than my organization. That's where I do a lot of trash talking as well, but and more political stuff as opposed to if you followed me on my other social media accounts for just my organization, it's a very different voice for obvious reasons. But so stilettos and shotguns, you'll definitely see We the Female, but you won't always see stilettos and shotguns on We the Female, if that makes any sense, or the other way around.
Absolutely. No, I completely understand that because you have to keep that professional side a little separate for sure.
Yeah.
So, so we the female.
Mm-hmm.
I started looking into this, and you have your story, what the origin story. It is always vital how we find the person becoming the person they are,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because this is where we find differences when someone turned left instead of turn right, or when, so we find where we differ is where we go back in time to where we had experiences that may have changed or something like that. So I'd love for you to share what We the Female is and how that came to fruition.
Well, I come from, I make the joke that I'm half Texan on my grandfather's side. My family, my mother's family are from Midland, Odessa, Texas, which is, uh, you know, to hear the West Texas side tell you the real side, the controversy. There's always a little poking fun at each other there. But so guns were never, I was never afraid of guns. I've always been around guns. That was never a thing. But many years ago, I became a victim of domestic violence. I had left my husband, who was the abuser at that time. We were splitting up, and he came to. We were getting along or working on that for our daughter, and I invited him to my home for Thanksgiving so we could have a Thanksgiving together. It was the first one that we were going to be separated, living apart with. So he came over and proceeded to get drunk, and of course hid the fact, as they always do, that he was also had been prescribed bipolar medication at this point. He was active duty military at this point, and I don't know if you know anything. First of all, drinking can just make people crazy anyway. But if you're familiar with the legitimate dangers to themselves and other people with bipolar medication and drinking, it's bad. So
And bipolar itself. I mean, just being bipolar itself
bipolar
is
itself,
already a
yeah,
danger.
but
Right.
when you
Yeah.
start mixing,
Right. The combination.
right? So it was so of course we didn't know this, so I didn't discourage him from drinking because I didn't know he was on these meds, right? So he proceeds to get drunk. Everybody's leaving for the night. And not because of that. We all had a good time. Great evening. And then he was ready to leave. And he was convinced that I had hidden his keys from him, which was not the case. They had fallen between a sofa table and the sofa, and kind of bounced when they hit the ground, just right to the other side of the sofa. So we couldn't find them. And proceeded to beat the hell out of me for 3 hours, essentially saying that he was going to continue beating me until I found the keys. Or, excuse me, gave him back his keys, to which I kept, trying to tell him, I don't know where your keys are. I was sexually assaulted as well. I don't talk about that a lot. I feel like there's enough people that talk about that in the 2A space, that I don't need to rehash that. And that's a spot that's still a little sensitive for me. So, but he was arrested they caught him after he left. He had already left by the time the law enforcement showed up. And they got him on the road and arrested him for DUI, which was cut and dry, right? That was a black and white issue. He blew well
Pretty much. Right.
over the limit, especially being on the meds.
Right.
And then
even even a DWI or whatever, because you're under some influence anyway.
it was high. I don't remember what it was, but I remember it was. Put a pin in that, and I'll tell you why I was surprised they let it go. And then felony, Class C felony, domestic assault. And the reason that they charged him with a felony is because my face was bloody and my mouth cut up. My eyes were swollen and shut, and by the time that the cops got there. So fast forward to, so this was on a Thursday. For those that don't know, when there's a holiday, your speedy due process, of your arraignment doesn't have to happen in 48, 72 hours. It can be extended because of the holidays. So, which is what happened.
And this was Thanksgiving, right? So we're talking about it's day off, one day off, but you're already off anyway.
Correct. So it was
Government
4
wise,
days
they're probably
later, right?
closed.
It was the following Monday
Right.
before he was arraigned. To which at that point you can imagine what I looked like. Right. They gave 4 days for those bruises to finally come to the surface, and it was bad. I mean, 2 black eyes. My nose was swollen. The inside of my mouth was cut up. He'd fractured my teeth. I was, when I say bruised head to toe, literally head to toe. I've got some tendon damage in my ankles. I had fingerprints around my throat where he picked me up and threw me around. And the reason that matters is to tell you those details is because, and I'm sorry, y'all, those are my dogs. And so they'll probably be intermittently making a vocal guest appearance.
It's totally okay. It's hilarious because my girlfriend and I don't have a dog currently. We had one, had two, but we have her girlfriend's downstairs, and she invited her over, and they bring the dog over, and we have my nieces in visiting from back east. So she's like, "Okay, dog might go upstairs and might bark." I go, "No, I think Carrie has dogs. I think she likes dogs." So I think
got
we're
2
we're
dogs,
we're all
4
simpatico
cats.
here.
Yeah, I got 2 dogs.
So maybe the
4
dogs will
cats.
get on. We'll get them on and have them talking to each other before
No,
before
don't
this
get them
video.
started because they're obnoxious. But because we live in the woods, every little noise, right? They just want to go after it. I mean, sometimes
Well, you
it's
have
all
to,
night
yeah.
long. It's just nuts. Yeah, I'm talking to you. So I just got to look up who me. Anyway, so the reason why giving you the details of what I look like matters is because that following Monday, the female prosecutor, say that again, prosecutor, I sat down with her and she looked at me and she says, "Well, he's got no priors. He's active duty military." I said, "Yeah, but they were kicking him out of the military on a separate issue. Not behavior wise. It was some other stuff, medical, whatever." And she said, "Well, because of all of this, we're going to drop the DUI charge completely." So that's when I was saying that's why it mattered, because he blew well over the legal limit. They had him on a DUI.
Right.
Just locked down.
Right. It would have been an extreme DUI or whatever, even at that point, or whatever.
It would have been, whatever,
yeah.
like the next level of it is. Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely,
yeah.
absolutely would have been. And they dropped that totally, and they dropped the felony domestic assault charge to a Class C misdemeanor so they could offer him a diversion agreement. And for those of you that aren't familiar with diversion agreements, essentially that means that he commits to restitution, not to me. I had to apply separately to receive restitution for me and all my
Through a
expenses.
civil suit or still through some criminal?
No. So when you're in a situation like this, a victim, so they have to pay fines to the court and that kind of stuff. But a victim can request financial restitution on these types of situations for their time lost, and work and all these kind of things. So I requested that. They denied it, which is, excuse my language, but bullshit. But they did.
Oh, there's no language barrier here.
Oh, good. Oh, are you sure about
Free
that?
speech. I don't know if you heard it. There's this thing called free speech. I've already got a strike I got a strike on YouTube for saying an opinion and then saying it's just my opinion.
Yeah,
and then they still struck me for
Yeah,
it.
of
So,
course. That's why X is becoming so popular. Even it's not great,
yes,
but it's
that's why
still
it's live streaming there as well.
Yeah. So I said, "Well, and the reason she did that, I know why she did it, and that's because domestic abuse victims don't typically testify against their abusers." And there's a lot of valid reasons why. So before anybody who watches this decides that they want to, posture up with me on this, I promise you will lose that argument, because you don't know. If you in any way whatsoever blame a victim of domestic abuse for staying in her situation or not following through with something, it's usually because you have absolutely no idea. Like, because the amount of
I had a hard time ending a relationship that slowly faded over time. Okay. I had a hard time breaking that off. and
Yeah.
that was with
Well,
someone that was I was friendly with.
yeah.
Imagine being terrified and
Well,
imagine being under duress and,
imagine being threatened. Imagine a
threat,
man
right,
telling
threatened
you that he's
duress and all the
yeah,
pressure.
that he's going to
There's
kill
no
your
way to right. And also each situation is different, although these are similarly tyrannical in their nature, you know. And
well, they um oftentimes they're isolated, they're forced away from their families, they're forced into financial
yeah.
lockdown, which he tried with me. That didn't fly, fortunately.
So
Um,
that's the tactic, right? They separate from your friends so that they're only his friends or whatever, no friends, no family, all that contact, and then they financially lock you up so that you are
you're stuck.
like stuck.
So,
Yeah.
and then they
Yeah.
continue on to make you believe that when they do finally start hitting you, that it's your fault. And I still struggle with believing certain things are my fault to this day. Like, and I've been through therapy and I've done a lot of stuff, and I work with abuse. So, even though consciously I know I'm not, I'm still affected, and I still have to work through those things. There's still things that I'm afraid to do in my life, um, where the root of that fear is based in not being good enough. Then, like it's still a struggle. Like cooking is one of them because I couldn't cook right, and then I was in.
Wow.
I couldn't cook anything right, but then when I didn't cook, I was um, also a horrible person. Like so,
Mm.
they literally put you in situations where you can't win. That's one of
You
the reasons
cannot
I
win.
can't
Yeah.
stand so many people using the term gaslighting nowadays, and they just throw it around. Like most people have no idea what gaslighting really is, that are
Right.
using it.
That's like legit, absolute bona fide gaslighting from
It's
people.
you
That's like
100%. Yeah, I lived
right.
in that
Right.
like 100%. So, um, which is a manipulation of somebody's reality, an intentional manipulation of somebody's reality. It's not just
Well,
lying.
I mean, it's not informed consent, to be completely honest.
No,
I
no,
mean,
and that's a whole other
they create this false reality that you think is the reality,
right.
and you make decisions based on what you think the illusion that they drew for you. So you're not being informed correctly, and you're being manipulated. Those are lies, you know.
Well, it's bigger than that too. But anyway, so
Yeah. Yes.
um,
Yes.
so I was willing to testify against him, and I told her that. I said I'm willing to testify against him, and she looked at me. I'll never forget it. She looked at me. She says, "Are you sure about that?" Most victims don't want to testify against their abusers, and again, for all the reasons it's true. And I said, "Yeah." I said, "I know that, and yes, I'm absolutely committed to doing it because I don't want him doing this to anybody else." And she still gave him the diversion agreement. And that
So do
means
you
they go
think they did that? Did they do that just to also, like, lock a conviction too? Because it would be harder because
not a
of
conviction,
his pa or oh, okay, okay, it's
diversion
not even a
agreement.
conviction?
uh,
They literally just basically dismissed the like,
Yeah,
f
because she didn't think she could get the win, right? Because here's the reality: prosecutors, DAs, all these people, they don't give a crap about victims. They give a shit about their win and loss record.
they
And
care
she didn't
about the
think that she was
percentage, yep.
she didn't think she was going to get the conviction, so she was willing to divert this out, even though it was there. There was all kinds of concrete proof. Um, the I didn't talk about this a lot in the beginning, mostly just because I'd kind of forgotten about it a little bit, but because you block things out. I don't know if you've ever been through trauma sometimes, but he also and it's not as significant of a piece of the story, which is part of it too. But he was also the Navy swept it under the rug too. Now they don't do that anymore. They're much. This was my incident happened about 17, not quite 17 years ago, and the way that they handle these situations has significantly changed. Like they don't tolerate. It's almost too much the other way,
Right.
where I feel
Well,
bad
I mean, ki
sometimes.
like, akin, like, to the NFL has addressed some of theirs with their players
No,
doing
they
that or
haven't.
some
Don't get me
well, no, no,
started
no,
on
no,
that fucking
I'm talking about on
NFL.
a PR I'm talking on a
Yeah,
complete PR standpoint, they're
yeah,
trying to cover these, right, by addressing them, right? Like, while they let Joe Mixon and Kareem Hunt still play. I don't but,
yeah.
I
When
is it
when
something like
people
that or
when professional
how
football players are getting punished greater for smoking weed than they are beating women, that was when I stopped watching professional football, and that's been about 20 years
Yeah, I
ago.
stopped as well, just so you know yeah, I saw Joe Mixon knock out that woman, and he pulled a gun on somebody, like, a week ago or something, a couple weeks ago, something
Yeah,
ridiculous
it's
like
just I don't support professional sports
whatever. Yeah.
capacity because of that. So
I
anyway,
agree, and okay, so they do handle it differently than they did then, but back then it was handled much less
well, they were kicking him
sensitively.
out already anyway, so they're like, well, why bother with sending him to mass?
Right.
He's out. So, but so he goes into arraignment again. You have to remember by this point I was in bad shape, like that was the same day that the county sheriff's department actually came and took the photos of me for my for the records, right? Because they have to wait for the bruises to show up. So it was the same day. And they always do it on the day that it's the worst, which is by design, right? So, but when somebody successfully completes a diversion agreement, what they have to do is they have to pay a fine. They have to go to counseling for so many sessions of counseling, and they can't get anything be charged or convicted of anything worse than a traffic ticket for however many years they designate. I think in his case, it was 5 years. And once that's done, then what it shows on your record is that you successfully completed a diversion agreement. So it's not even a conviction or an acquittal. It's just a successful
Probation.
successful
I mean,
diversion agreement.
right.
No, it's not even an admission of guilt. So
No, I'm just saying, like, I don't even know those terms. I'm just saying it's like you just got to be a good boy for 5 years, and then it's like wiped clean, basically.
Essentially, yeah. So, but
Ugh.
one of the things that really struck me was after after the arraignment, and I was standing out in the hall with the two arresting deputy sheriffs, and they said to me, "Do you have a place to go for 3, 4, 5 days? I can't remember exactly what it was, and to hide that he doesn't know about." And I thought that was an odd thing to say to me. And I said, "Well, yeah, I do. Why?" And they said, "Because the chances of violence actually increasing is going to be very significant once he's released from jail." And that is because abusers are narcissists. And in some cases, and in my case, mine was a sociopath as well. And so they, in a narcissist or sociopath's mind, right, it's much bigger than just making somebody else feel like the victim. Or making it somebody else's fault. They legitimately believe in their warped minds that they're the victim.
Yeah, they're delusional, 100% delusional.
And it can't be treated with medicine. And the only way it can be treated is through behavior therapy modification. And that's the catch-22 with narcissism, is that you can't treat somebody that doesn't think they have a problem. So like less than 5% of narcissists are called self-admitted narcissists when they're willing to acknowledge it and be able to get therapy for it. Very, very few. They're out there, but it's less than 5%. It's actually like 2%.
Well, it is, because you're blind to the thing that is what makes you the thing.
Correct.
Like,
Correct.
Yeah, totally makes sense.
So that was interesting to me, and that was shocking. At that time, I didn't have a gun, and it wasn't because I was anti-gun. I just never crossed my mind. I didn't live in a gun culture in Washington State where I lived.
You knew of them, and you're like, okay,
yeah,
and
I'd
okay,
shot them, and it's fine.
Yeah.
But of course, I had, as you can imagine, horrific nightmares. It was awful to the point where
I can't even imagine, to be honest.
It was pretty bad. So, like, I have crowns on my teeth. That's how I had to have crowns put on my teeth from the fracture from him hitting me so hard in my jaw. And how it didn't break my jaw surprises me. I have some joint problems with it, but for my teeth to be fractured, because when he punched me, it went like this, and they came together and fractured. But it's on the side. That's why I pointed to it. But it's those cops knew that he wasn't going to do that. So
no way.
That also added to the fear and the trauma, right? So the night terrors, people have heard of night terrors and things with PTSD. Well, I'd have that, but I would actually wake up from those night terrors fully conscious, and my vocal cords would be paralyzed, and so I couldn't scream or even say anything, which is terrifying. On top of the terror, my legs would be
like paralyzed. A paralysis. Yeah,
it was. So my legs were paralyzed. Sometimes I couldn't move my legs. These types of things. So I did go do a special therapy called EMDR. It's a very common treatment now.
The light therapy,
it's sensory therapy. So it's a light bar. Yeah. It's a sound and you hold these little things and they vibrate, and it makes your brain process differently. Anyway, it helped with the nightmares. They improved. They didn't go away completely.
Do you recommend that for people?
I do. However, you need to have a very good psychologist that can administer that test, that understands it really well. And in my case, the therapist I had, she was good at administering it, but one of the things that she did not make clear to me when I started that therapy was that you get worse before you get better, because it doesn't just address the trauma, right? It's not, you can't go in and say, I want to, your brain, right? This
I
amazing
have to bring
machine,
out the trauma first before it can really address
whatever
it.
other
So it's
trauma
like,
that you got in there
right,
is going to
yeah,
come out too.
yeah,
And so it gets
yeah,
worse before it gets better. And she neglected to tell me
yeah.
that. But that being said, the nightmares got
That's an
better.
interesting thing to not mention, because you would, it just
Yeah.
seems like a general how people
You would
are with
think.
any kind of wellness is that there is a pain first before
Yeah.
any progress.
And I think that she just dropped the ball,
I'm sorry
whatever,
that,
right? She
yeah,
dropped the,
yeah.
whatever it is. So the nightmares did get better. They didn't go away completely. And it wasn't until I'd remarried, and I was married. I married another sailor. It's what happens when you live in a town with 3 military bases. I married who I'm married to now. He's now a retired military officer, but he took me down and we bought a shotgun, and I put a shotgun on a rail on the side of my bed. So all I had to do was reach down and grab it because it was on this cool rail. And that's when the nightmare stopped. So what's interesting about that, and the brain and how the brain works, is I would have dreams. Before I had the shotgun, I would actually have nightmares of me shooting my abuser. And I remember one in particular, I shot him with a shotgun and his head exploded. Like, this is how violent my dreams were. Like, they were awful. And half of his head exploded, and the half of it that was still intact was laughing at me, and he was still coming after me and threatening to kill my daughter. Like, that's how wild these dreams were. But they all ended. So those went away with the therapy. I still had other kinds of nightmares, things like calling 911 and nobody answering, or putting me on hold and the bad guys were still coming, those kind of nightmares. But when I bought that shotgun, it went away. And so long before I was in the
Literally
gun,
that night,
huh?
just a peace of mind, something just
Yeah, it wasn't even, I couldn't with full
right. But I
honesty
mean,
say
you can correlate the two for sure.
I 100% can correlate the two. Yeah, I can't tell you the exact day, but 100%. Yeah. Um, so long before I was in the gun industry and the guns, the 2A space or any of that, I owned a day spa, um, and worked in that field with women. Um, but that's where the names stilettos and shotguns actually came from. So it's because the shotgun is what changed the trauma for me. For those of you that don't understand PTSD and trauma, you can't cure PTSD. So without taking up a whole hour of the science on this, the hot take for you is that the brain, being the amazing machine that it is that when there's severe trauma like that, your brain's neurons will actually it'll rewire itself to protect you from the trauma, because your brain struggles to disassociate whether it's real or not. So your brain, and that was what happened to me, was the nightmares, right? And so, but because my brain was permanently rewired, I still struggle with sleep, because I would go 7 or 8 days literally not even an hour of sleep. How I look back on that now and I think, God, how did I do that? Running a business, and sometimes having to operate as a single mom when my husband was deployed, and not going. It's amazing what the body can do. It's just it's a fascination to me, after living through some
And
of it.
and it's interesting how acutely sharp it is under that duress, because you're feeling under some kind of stress. That's what it is that's driving that,
Yeah,
to keep
yeah,
you alive. And that's what your acuteness is you're still focused and sharp, and you can do it for a really long time, surprisingly, with the
yeah.
body, but there's a point where it just shuts down.
It
Yeah.
just shuts it down. Yeah, and it's super fascinating. But anyway, so fast forward several years, and I lived at that time. I live in Georgia now, but at the time I lived in Washington State, and Washington State introduced a law called 1639. If you're in the 2A space at all, or lived in Washington State, you're familiar with this law, because at the time that it was
What was
presented,
it
it
called?
was
1639?
I-1639.
I'm sorry, what was it called again?
1639. Initiative. So
Okay, hold on.
I
I think I
one.
just lost you.
That's okay.
I think I just lost your hold on one second. Please continue.
Okay. I is an initiative. So I-1639 was the bill. And it was at the time that it was presented, almost 7 years ago, it was one of the stricter gun control laws in the country. They introduced it a month after Parkland, the Stoneman Douglas, Marjorie Stoneman Douglas shooting in Florida. And they actually, it wasn't even a month. It was within a few weeks, which means they had it written and they were waiting. They had it sitting, waiting to introduce it for at the right time. They're, politicians, if nothing else, are opportunists. And
Yeah, we find that more as a running theme, don't we?
yeah, isn't that the truth? So so I read it, and most people don't actually read legislation, and that's what has gotten so many people into trouble. They'll at the very best, usually what they do is they read the highlights or the descriptions, right, and the summaries in their
Right.
in their pamphlet, but they don't actually read the bill. Well, this bill was actually taken off of the ballot because it didn't meet the criteria. For those of you that don't know anything about petitions and initiatives and these types of things, when they're trying to get things on the ballot, it's very strict criteria that they have to follow. The paper has to be a certain size, like for when you're signing the petitions and what you're reading, the bill when you're reading it, has to be the weight of the paper has to be a certain weight. The paper has to be a certain size. The font has to be a very specific size. It has to be, it's really detailed. Well, the font, there was 2 bills that were produced. The fonts were intentionally, one was a tax, grocery tax or something. The fonts were intentionally too small, and something else was like the margins were off, something goofy.
Yeah.
So it got pulled off on a technicality and ended up getting conveniently snuck back on the ballot at the last minute. So there were a lot of components in this bill that sounded great to people that, I mean, even people that support gun ownership but want responsible, safe gun ownership. Safe storage. This bill made it a law that you are obligated to keep your guns safely stored at home, or you can be charged with a felony if it's stolen and used in a crime. Okay, cool. What if you're on vacation and you don't know somebody's broken in your house and take you, right? Even better, what do they classify as safe storage?
Mm-hmm.
They didn't. The bill also forced a mandatory,
and even the better one is because it completely infringes on the Fourth Amendment. How can you come and ask to check if I'm storing my gun safely? You can't ask me about my firearms. And if I have
yeah, but that
right?
wasn't even addressed. Like there was nothing in it even about what they would do in that respect.
Right, but you understands like that just leaves it so open that leaves other violations even more in the gray zone, right? Like in that way.
So it also had in there that you had to take an online. Well, you could take it online. You had to take a safety class, which was bullshit. It was a joke. A lot of people, we were offering it for free just because it was and it was literally 10 minutes online, the slideshow. But you had to do that. And then it was an automatic, what they called a cooling off period for rifles, right? So you had to wait an automatic 10 days to be able to get a rifle. They also reclassified many rifles, including some manufacturers' lever action 22. So for those of you that may have done any squirrel shooting with your grandpa when you were kids, that was
22s
they reclassified some of those as assault weapons.
22.
Yeah, the list had like 75 guns on it, and it's just a list that gets passed around from state to state. Is really what it is. And nobody checks because these gun people, they don't know, right? They don't know guns.
Yeah,
we know that. So
they had the bump stock and the machine gun from the come on, please.
They don't understand any of that. So
yeah, all that.
That being said, one of the components that was in this that wasn't in any of the promotion, any of the advertising, or in the summary, right, in the voters pamphlet. By the way, he's now dead, but Paul Allen that owned the Seahawks, he helped to heavily fund that bill getting passed because his sister was very anti-gun. I think he was more apathetic about it, but his sister was very anti-gun, and so he put millions and millions of dollars into getting that bill passed and advertised. But it was false advertisement because the big component in it that threw me into all of this was the one clause that was actually the most clearly written in the entire piece of legislation. And to paraphrase, it said that when you go to sign to purchase a gun, you signed your 4473. For those of you that don't know what that is, a 4473 is a federal background check form performed by what's called NICS system, the NICS system, NICS system, and it's a federal background check done through the FBI to make sure that you are not a prohibited person and can't own a gun. So if somebody tells you that you can just go buy a gun, guns are as easy to buy as oranges at the grocery store. Ask them where they're shopping, because I'd like to know, because they're actually
Because I have some, I think, maybe or maybe not. And I believe this form is basically 20 questions about asking if you're a legal citizen, if you're going to use it for this or use it for
Have you
that.
ever been
It's
convicted of a
it's
crime?
mandatory. I
Yeah.
cannot ship any firearm to my house. I have to
Yeah.
ship it to a firearm dealer to fill out the paperwork before I can ever do that. A lot of people possibly might not know that. So it
Yeah.
is definitely good to inform
It's a
everyone.
huge process actually to even to purchase a gun. Even if you have a permit, some states, if you have a permit, they won't make you go through the federal background check, because the permit, as you've already done it with your permit.
Right, and the fingerprints and everything.
Yeah, some states that doesn't matter. Washington State being one of those. It used to be that you could still get your permit if you had a, um, or if you had a permit, you didn't have to do that, which is not the case anymore. And a lot of states have moved away from that. But again, it's silly. So anyway, so that's what that is. And in Washington State now, when you sign that NICS form, that 4473, to get your background check, it's also a waiver of your HIPAA rights, like your medical rights, so that they can look at your medical record and deny you the purchase of a gun based on what they see in your medical record. Now, we all know that they're not looking for a broken arm. They're obviously looking for things like PTSD. So
Right.
PTSD, there are studies out there that show that the second largest demographic that suffers from PTSD as a whole, to veterans being number one. And that's always we always associate PTSD with veterans typically. But the second, there are studies, again, and I'm sure there's studies that probably say it's car accident, you're right, but there's enough studies out there, that it's disturbing that it's not taken note that domestic violence victims are second. It's a huge number, for
Yeah.
PTSD.
Yeah.
So that's what they're looking for, of course. So
Right.
I spoke out about it.
And when you need services to help, like say for example, there's government services available for you to admit that you have that you're challenged with certain things with PTSD. Now you're on the forms that they can now use against you to prohibit you from protecting yourself like a conscious citizen.
Yeah, put a
It's
pin in that, and I'm going to
yeah,
open your eyes to a few things that's going to surprise you with that.
yeah, yeah,
I want to come back to that and
absolutely,
educate your listeners that may not know.
absolutely.
But so I spoke out about that. At the time, I owned one of the most successful day spas in Washington State. I was one of the first people to create an apprenticeship program to train people. I was educating people. I had all these employees. Like, life was good, right? And my life
Yeah,
literally changed overnight, because the post that I made about that law was simply, to paraphrase. I should find that and repost it. It's been a minute.
yeah. Let's do it.
It says,
We'll
yeah,
we'll we'll get a
I'll have to dig through
Twitter
and find it. But
box thing
it
or
said,
X thing.
for those of you that voted for this, and right, and at this point, I'm talking to my friends on Facebook. This was a Facebook post initially, and then I screenshotted it and put it on my Instagram, which at the time had like 300 followers, because it was my personal one. It was just my play, right? And it was a beauty
Right,
page. It was beauty and fashion. It wasn't,
right,
you know,
right.
but it said, for those of you that voted for this, you just put me in a position where I could be denied the purchase of a firearm because I have PTSD on my medical record from being beaten. And and at this point, right, I was a very prominent member of my community. I own commercial real estate in this town that I lived in. I had this prominent business. I was an employer. I was involved in the community. So people knew who I was, and they knew my situation because I didn't hide from it. I came to work black and blue every day because I wasn't going to hide it in shame as a
Right.
survivor. So they all knew. They all knew what happened. And they
Yeah.
also knew he was stalking me afterward. He took a job as a pizza delivery driver to justify having a reason to be in my neighborhood where I owned a condo. That's how I told you he was a psychopath. Yeah, he's a sociopath.
That that's what that would do. Yes.
Yeah, he took
Has
a
direct
second job.
indications.
He took a second job. He worked he was a DOD employee during the day, and then took this second job, blamed me because now he had to hire a lawyer. And so it was my fault. He had to take a second job, but it was really, he took the second job so that he could stalk me. So he, oh,
So he got some kind of honorable discharge, I guess, then to allow him to work as an employee in the DoD or
yeah, yeah, it wasn't
okay.
dishonorable. No, it
Right,
was
right.
actually
Well,
bad.
obviously,
Yeah,
and I'm sure, I mean, part of the PTSD from him was from whatever he experiences as, in his
he didn't have
life.
PTSD.
I'm sorry, he did not? Oh, well,
Nope,
that's right. He's bipolar, right? That's right.
bipolar.
I apologize.
Yeah.
Right. Sorry. So
So
how was he diagnosed bipolar? Was he bipolar before entering the Navy? Did that exacerbate it? Did that
no, I don't know because that didn't come
Okay.
to light until after we had already separated. So that was
Okay.
all
Sorry.
that was
And
new to learn afterward.
if I overstep, please tell me. I just trying to understand the best,
I
path to
understand.
this for people.
So I spoke about it and I said, so you just put me in a position where I may be denied the purchase of a gun to defend myself from him, and you guys know he's stalking me. And I got a lot of, oh my God, I'm so sorry. I can't believe he did that to you. I did not know, or not that he did that to you. I did not know that. And I said, yeah, because you didn't read the bill. And they said, yeah, we read the bill. We read the bill. I'm like, you didn't, because it was the last paragraph in the bill, or one of the last paragraphs. And it was the only thing that was very clear, because oftentimes what happens with legislation is it's not what the legislation says, it's what it doesn't say. And it's how this arbitrary language that they use, and how, oh, we're going to set up committees to make these decisions, and then they fund these committees, and then everybody has plausible deniability. That's a whole other show. I'm happy to break down for you to help educate people on how to read legislation, because it's wild when you
Very
actually
important also because we do not as a general population
do
understand
not
how
know.
this legislation
No,
how we get bamboozled.
and it's done on purpose. They make it hard to
Oh
read on
yeah.
purpose so that you don't read it, right?
I mean,
That's all by
the
design.
legislators can't read it even in time. So it's not how can we
Right.
expect
Yeah.
ourselves to understand?
Yeah, exactly. So they were shocked. And I said, well, you did this. So long story short, I put it over on Instagram, um, just for shits and giggles, just as I shouldn't even say shits and giggles, just as an awareness thing. There was nothing political about anything I did at that time, especially over on Instagram. But I followed some gun pages and stuff, and two-way pages, because I'm a gun, I like guns, but um, I was not in the world. I was not in the gun world at all, in the industry, the community, any of it. And a bunch of people tagged Colion Noir in that, if you guys know who he is. And I blame him when I see him now. I jokingly blame him. I'm like,
Napoleon Noir, you blame?
yeah, yeah. Because
I've seen Napoleon. I love his work. Yes,
he's a good guy. So he actually reposted my post talking
that's
about the law.
awesome. Hey, I'd love to talk with him someday too. So,
Yeah. Hey, hey,
but
hey.
no, that's awesome. That's cool. I love how it's like,
So
who radicalized you? Colion
yeah,
Noir.
Colion Noir. Yeah, kind of. Well, the government radicalized me, but he was the catalyst for it.
Yeah, the
But
government radicalizes everybody apparently, doesn't it? Don't
yeah.
they?
So he reposted it, and of course, here I am now, right? And then I started my organization that year. I didn't have the intention on teaching firearms at that time. Interestingly enough, I wanted to do the stuff that you need prior to that, which is situational awareness, and just helping women wrap their brain around understanding the importance of why they need to learn how to defend themselves, not necessarily how, with weapons. But that just naturally evolved. Obviously, in 2020, I had the opportunity to go become a firearm instructor. Still wasn't going to teach firearms at the
Sure,
time.
sure you weren't.
I wasn't. I really wasn't.
I
But I
know.
thought it'd be good to have the
We've
cert.
sometimes greatness is thrust upon us. So
Well, so I had a tenant in my building. She went out of business because she couldn't afford to stay open from COVID, and she wanted to break her lease. And I said, if you can have everything out by the end of the week, you can. Now I had a classroom to teach my classes, and this is all within a month of me getting my certification. Then where am I going to do this, right? Because they have a lot of much tighter restrictions there than they do in Georgia for shooting on property and stuff. And
sure.
it's okay. It's okay. Go lay down. I know. So, so right after that happened, a woman reached out to me that I've known for a long time, an attorney, and she said, "Hey, I'm an abuse survivor," which you'd be blown away at how many people have contacted me, whether through I know or have met. You'd be very surprised at some of the people that have contacted me, women that have on very prominent people on X that have reached out to me, that have told me that they were abuse survivors. A lot of women with big women, important women. that felt comfortable to tell me that, and I will never share who that is. If they're not ready, then we're not going to share that information.
I'm
Just
not interested in knowing who. I want them to
yeah,
keep that for however till they feel
it's not
comfortable to
necessary,
do it. Yeah,
So for those of you who are listening, like,
absolutely.
who is it? You don't. Some things you just don't need to know. You don't just because the internet makes you think you
Mhm.
need to know everything. You don't,
Well, I
right?
mean, and honestly, just because someone of prominence has it, there's people that aren't of prominence, and these are actually the people who do get swept under. They don't have the
Right,
resources to get the same help that we need for them. So we need to empower these people to speak up, and we
right.
want them to feel comfortable to
And
feel,
that's what I do,
you know,
right? And so,
right.
and that was the case with this lady. She was a very prominent member of the community. She was very quiet about being an abuse survivor. Reached out to me. She says, "I'm an abuse survivor. I also live on 30 acres with a natural berm because there's a granite quarry behind me. So
We
you're
have
welcome.
arranged, ladies and gentlemen.
So you now I have training property. So
Beautiful.
I put it out there. I said, well, turns out I'm going to be able to teach. I've got a classroom now that I didn't have to pay rent for. Well, I mean, I didn't have to rent a set. I already own the building. I'm paying the mortgage on the building, but I didn't have to go rent
Right,
another space.
right,
Um,
right.
I now have training facility for training, and I put it out there. I put a couple classes out. Just said, let's see what happens. I had almost a 6-month waiting list for women, and this was just in one county in Washington State.
And how
Um,
large are the classes? So we know like 20 or 30, and that you had
no, no,
6 month
no,
waiting list?
no. At that time, I only took 6 because I was a new
Okay.
instructor.
Right.
Um,
Yeah, absolutely. You started small, but you just had such a demand right out of the gate. That's
so
amazing.
I teach 12 now in a
That's
class.
amazing. At 12 is a lot of people.
Well, I do it with 2 assistants and an RSO.
Okay.
So I because I could do it with one, or I could even do it with just an RSO. It's just a lot more work on me because when I'm actually doing live fire, I only put 6 on the line at a time. So six are shooting, 6 are watching because they'll learn from each other.
Mhm.
And so I want them watching each other.
Yeah. So they
And
buddy up, I guess, in some a lot of ways,
no,
or
no budding
oh,
up
okay.
because I don't
It's just
want their
generally just
friends.
watching everyone and
Right.
just
No, you
learning.
just watch. Like
Yeah.
if somebody's struggling with this, they're going to see somebody. Oh, maybe if I put my foot like that, it's
Yep.
watching people's good, right?
You'd be
Um,
surprised how much just that improves people because they
no, I wouldn't
adjust their
because
body
I
in the
do it.
smallest ways that they don't
Yeah,
even know, and they
yeah.
improve like
Yeah,
nothing, you know?
that's which is exactly why I do it. So that's exactly why I do it. So and it just makes it more of a community feel, makes the women more comfortable doing it that way. But by doing it that way and having those number of assistants, I now go to 2 students to 1 assistant. So that they're getting more personalized treatment. Because what I have found as an instructor is what is considered the standard for most fundamental basic training and entry level class is still well above where most women are. I've had many women over the last, how long have I been teaching now? 5 years. Yeah, 5 years, who have taken other classes and come to me and they don't know how to lock the slide back on their gun. They don't know how to load a magazine. That's a problem. So
Very much so, yes.
most fundamental classes are like here, all fundamental like, and then ours is like here. Now I'm sure that there's individuals out there that do it here, right? I just don't know who they are, but I mean, I'm talking about the curriculums in general. So I
Right.
decided, or didn't decide, I figured out that there was a problem with that and I wanted to solve that problem. So we wrote our own curriculum and we now train our own instructors as well. One of the things I'm known for, 2 of the things I'm known for, one, flipping liberal women on guns with gun control laws. One in particular, she wore her notorious RBG hat to class.
I'm gonna put that
Um,
up while you tell us this story, but I got my
um,
friend Zach, saying.
she worked. She was a nail client in my salon many years prior, so she already trusted me a little bit more. Took pistol. She was okay with pistol. She struggled. She was in her 70s, so she physically struggled a little bit.
Okay, and
Um,
that's real. That's a realistic thing.
but when she came to take pistol, she wanted ARs banned completely. And I said, "Do you trust me?" And she says, "I do." I said, "I want you to come take this AR class." So she paid for it. Wasn't even going to let her pay for it. I didn't want her to pay for it, but she paid for it. She came the next day. She took it, but she was making a statement, right? She wore her notorious RBG hat to class.
Ruth Bader Ginsburg, nice.
Yeah, well, don't poo-poo Ruth Bader Ginsburg because contrary
No,
to what the conservative
that's a
media
tough woman.
wants
That
you to
was a
think,
tough woman.
she was an extraordinary woman. And a lot of the stuff that she's talked about has been misconstrued and manipulated by conservatives. And it frustrates me because she was phenomenal. And what she did and some of the stuff that where she laid down for women was amazing. I also don't think Sandra Day O'Connor gets nearly the credit she should. That's a whole other podcast episode.
And I'm in
Um,
Arizona, so I know.
yeah, I've studied women's history, particularly women's Revolutionary War history, for almost 20 years. I'm very well versed in that, and so I could go off for hours about that, and how a
We'll do
lot
that
of
sometime.
women they don't get the credit and acknowledgement that they deserve for some of the extraordinary things that they've done. Anyway, so I get her out there. I get the ARs in her hand. She's shooting ARs. I've got a photo. I'll have to post one of the photos of it.
Yeah, that'd be great. I'd love to see it.
And she looked at me. She fired it a few times. She fired about 15 rounds, about half. I usually give them a full magazine because all that class is just letting them touch it for the first time, right? We don't get into tactical this, and I teach them how to load the magazine and load the gun. Other than that, we don't get into tactical. We're not doing. It's all just destigmatization of that AR platform. So she shot it and she was done. I think she had a lot of physical weaknesses. I think it just was too heavy for her. It's just too much.
And it's a bulky piece.
It's well, sometimes I have one that
for a
only
70-year-old woman, I hate to, I don't want to get ageist or sexist, but
no.
70-year-old man, I'm 50 and everything's hurting. So I know.
Yeah. So she looked at me and she said, she handed it back to me and she said, "I'm done." And I said, "Okay." And we had a chair for her and she said, "These aren't for me. AR-15s aren't for me, but I don't understand. And now I can tell you that I don't understand why they should be banned." And I said, "Here's your money back for class." She goes, "No, keep it." Because we do scholarships. And I'll get into that later. But
Right.
so that was the big thing, is that she learned that.
Yeah.
She goes, "That was it?" And I was like, "Yeah." She goes, "It's loud. That's about it." And I went,
Yeah.
So
Yeah, that's it's like aversion therapy, right? It's like, no, it's exposure therapy.
yeah, it's exposure,
Exposure
100%.
therapy.
And
We
so,
fear what we don't know and understand.
right. And so, she's not the only one. She's just one of the most notable one because of the statement she tried to make when she came in. But she was, it was great. So I've actually developed a reputation for this all over the country now. The other thing that I'm known for is I do what's called trauma-informed firearm instruction. And you're going to start hearing a lot more about this as time goes on. I didn't make the connection that that's what I did until one of my followers on X actually mentioned it when I had posted one of my stories about a woman that had some trauma attached to guns, a domestic abuse survivor. And we worked her through it. And I just been operating like that for years. I didn't think anything of it, And somebody had made the comment, "Oh, it's trauma. You're doing trauma-informed work." And well, then I saw two other female instructors post about that. So that was interesting that I was doing it, didn't realize I was doing it.
Yeah, and it really is interesting.
And it's also desperately needed more. And it's a very difficult thing for a lot of male firearm instructors to do. I'm just going to be honest. You've got to have an intuitiveness about yourself to be able to see it, because they may not tell you. You may have to read the body language and just get their energy to be able to see, because they may not always be an abuse victim. It could be that grandpa handed them a 357, when they were a kid to shoot and knocked them on their butt. And then everybody laughed about it and thought it was funny, or a 12 gauge, right? And knocked the kid on the butt,
right. Totally.
I remember going through, I didn't get knocked on the butt, but I remember, getting the 12 gauge handed to me at 8 years old, and my dad holding my shoulders, so that I wouldn't fall. So, these types of things happen. So
I remember firing a Mossberg 590 with a 3-inch shell pistol grip at like 17, thinking I knew what the heck I was doing, and the thing just
and see,
tore
for
your arms
men,
off.
not that men can't be traumatized by that, but men are more like, okay, well, let's just move on. Whereas women, right, they will definitely be more emotionally impacted, by that kind of stuff.
And emotion is when that logic part shuts down. Your process is shut down. How do you load, or how do you
Right.
click, and how do you,
Exactly.
all those
And
processes.
and I don't like that people, particularly a lot of conservative men now, really want to poo-poo women for being too emotional. Well, that's a very powerful tool and weapon.
Yeah, it's because we're different. We all have something to bring to the table, and
Yeah.
we need that. We need that.
Yeah.
It is something that you cannot find anywhere else.
It's
So we need
also
it.
the one thing that when it's channeled properly will absolutely get shit done in a way that
Yep.
men can't. And case in point, Gender ideology with schools. You pissed off the moms. You emotionally pissed them off, and look what started happening, right? So it's not a bad thing.
Yep.
And I hate that there's this manosphere bullshit that's put out by, perpetuated by Andrew Tate and I call him his tater talk.
Right. Well, it's because they say the emotion locks down the logic. And it's like, well, no, but if you manage the
Yeah,
emotion
if you
and
know
you
how
know
to,
what you're doing, you
right.
can enhance your logic. I mean,
And
crazy.
when you're ready, when you're in a situation where you need to defend yourself, sometimes you have to push that button for women to wrap their brain around that that's what they need to do. So anyway, so we have to be able to identify sometimes when the student themselves doesn't know. They may not realize that the reason that they're having fear of a gun is um, because of some trauma that they may not realize they have attached to it. And I can make someone, male, female, anybody, right, proficient at shooting, right? I can take you out, teach you how to shoot, run that gun. But if we don't address the core traumas that may be attached to that self-defense tool, you're never going to carry that gun and be able to use it in self-defense. You'll freeze or you just won't carry it, which we see commonly. Well over 80% of women that take a concealed carry class don't carry afterward because there's a failure in the training. These women are not comfortable carrying their
They're not
gun.
comfortable. Certainly, it
And
certainly seems under you
yeah,
under like you have to really sleep with you really have to get comfortable. You're
yeah,
basically talking about a thing that explodes in your hand. Any normal functioning lizard brain's not gonna get that until they deal with it. Like, they're
yeah.
just not it's not a
So
it
we tell
doesn't
people
connect.
your CCW class or our level 1 class, it's not the beginning, right? We want you to come back and there's other classes you
Yeah.
have to take and things. And it's really a lifelong study, truly. But we can get you comfortable enough to be carrying every day and to be able to execute, um, not a person, but the plan to use one,
Right,
if you need
the
to.
process is
Yeah,
you yes,
yeah, we can, within 3 or 4 classes, we can usually get you there. So, um,
proficiency.
particularly with me, with what I do doing trauma informed and women's firearm instruction, I know how to push. I was in the beauty industry for 3 years. Well, what that really means is I was in the industry of women, and how they think. And so what I've done that is different than what's out there with a lot of training is I've channeled all of my 30 years of experience. Yeah, I'm 50 as well. I started in the beauty industry when I was very young. Um,
Next rules.
I dropped out of college and went to beauty school. And it was the
Good for you.
best decision I ever made.
I wish I
Because
did that. I wish I dropped out.
I retired before I was 50 and I still own commercial real estate and which is what allows me to do what I do now, without a paycheck. Right. So, don't, unless you're going into sciences or something, you probably don't need a college degree. Learn how to invest your money and go into a trade. Right. The problem with people
Being
in
a
trades,
trade's the way to go.
the reason people think people in trades are lower is because a lot of times they don't know how to manage their money quite as well. But
They're work hard, play hard people generally. They're like, they
usually,
burn
yeah,
it all and they
yeah,
catch it on fire as they're partying on the weekend.
right. So, but if you got somebody that does, I mean, you can usually be pretty successful. So, um, case in point, right? I was a blue collar worker, right? That's the
Absolutely. I
deal.
mean, look at you're a literal American success story on
Yeah.
many
I
facets
was
or many.
homeless at one time too. I actually lived in a closet, slept in a closet of a salon that I worked in
Okay.
many years
Wow.
ago. Yeah, I didn't have a place to live and couldn't afford rent, so they moved a tanning bed out of it was like this little like walk-in closet, small, tiny walk-in closet.
Right.
I could touch. I'm 5'4" and I could touch the walls, like this.
I
That's how little it was. And I
mean,
slept in
and
that.
what I love about that story though is like no one sees
No.
those sacrifices,
Oh,
right?
I grew up
You
like a Cops
see the
episode. Yeah,
successful carry on the back and you're like,
yeah,
wow, what an instant success. How easy
no.
that came to her. You literally slept in a closet for how many years? I mean, come on. It's crazy.
It was I'm not quite a year, almost a year.
Yeah, but
But I
it's
was
amazing.
raised. If you looked at my, statistically, I should have been a failure, right? I was raised in a double wide trailer with drug addicts, like literally like a Cops episode. Like it was just terrible. And so by all intents and purposes, I should not have been the success story I am. So, I because of that, I can also be a little insensitive to excuses,
Right. Well,
with
certainly
people.
because you did not accept the victim mentality
Right.
at all. You
Right.
said pound sand and you just pushed.
Interestingly enough, though, you're correct. I don't. But interestingly enough, I struggle now, when I am legitimately victimized.
Yes. Yeah,
because
it's
I'm
hard to
not a
give yourself
victim.
a little grace, right?
Yeah. And
Yeah.
which I also struggled with wrapping my brain around being a domestic abuse survivor, right? So which and he knew that, right? And that he fed on my adamancy about not being a victim in any capacity whatsoever. I was always asking, what did I do in this situation? My abuser fed on that, right? And because he was able to feed on it, once it got to that point with me, I it was easy for me to blame myself instead of him who was the legitimate perpetrator. So and he knew that and he played on that.
Oh, for
So
sure.
I
Yeah, isn't
have
that
to
funny how they can both attack you as they're punching you? It's like, "Why are you making me hit you? Why are you making me hurt you?
yeah,
Why are you making me?" I can't. I mean, I'm so sorry that these
yeah,
things
it's
happen even.
so and it's we understand that all of my assistant instructors and women that we train to become and we have one man too very we do on occasion we'll get a man that's worth making one of our instructors and not to say that they're not good male instructors out there. My mentor is a guy the guy that I go to and a lot of people think he's an asshole.
Boy
He,
noir.
no, he's not my
No,
mentor.
I
He's
know.
not my training
I'm
mentor.
just
But he is kind of an asshole. But
right. So
but
it is a
I said
comfort thing though for general, like, you have how many male instructors at all in general,
one.
or you've one? Okay. And that makes total sense
Yeah,
that you would
only one.
it's your business how you perceive that,
It
right?
has nothing to
So,
do with
like,
it. That
you
has
should
nothing
be
to do with
picky,
it.
you should be
It has to do with the fact that these women,
Right,
particularly abuse victims, are more
right,
comfortable with a woman. And women, we just talk to each other differently.
right.
Right?
I would assume that that would be the thing, yeah.
I took 30 years of beauty industry and getting women to talk while I did their makeup or gave them a facial or did their, manicure and learned how to get information out of them to learn whether or not they were victims or if they have some sort of trauma attached to those firearms that they may not have. So, yeah, so that's, where it kind of came from. And then it was 3 years ago. I moved to Georgia 3.5 years ago, but was still, traveling to Washington to teach because there was still a need and there's still not enough instructors up there. And I'm in the process of finalizing an instructor to be able to teach while I'm not there. Now this year, she'll probably get to teach next year. I think she'll be ready next year because I run it like an apprenticeship. I just don't train them. And
Yeah,
so if you want to be a We the
no.
Female instructor, you're gonna invest time
You
because I
start with the broom sweeping and the trash
kind of sort
taking
of, yeah,
and
you
you
come
work
in
yeah,
this,
I totally understand how
yeah,
apprenticeship works. It's a trade. This is a trade. This is a skill.
yeah,
This is an absolute it is something that should be passed down from
yeah,
expert to people who do not know. That it
yeah.
really does need expertise.
Well, you bring in a different level of context and empathy when you do it that way. And so they have to start it as an assistant, and then they can work up to doing some of the leading. Right, I let them teach certain aspects of the class while I'm there, and then so next year she'll be ready to teach in Washington. But what I started doing was traveling and living in a minivan at Love's truck stops as I traveled across the country teaching. And fast forward to last year, and we had a partnership last year with USCCA. Um, it wasn't like they give us a lot of money, but they gave us resources, right? I had contacts, I had ranges that I could go to, which was way more valuable.
Oh my gosh, it's invaluable actually get
Having
range
those
time.
contacts is really what I
Yeah.
needed to facilitate, right? Because otherwise, I'm just calling, and these people are like, "Who the hell are you?" And now I'm like,
And it
"Oh,
is
I know."
community. We realize how much community when you have an interest or a need like this, the
Yeah,
community does matter because
right.
it all helps itself out
And so
to
once I
drive.
was able to go in and say, "Hey, I'm partnered with USCCA," then all of a sudden the door opened up.
That
Women did
opens
what I
every
needed.
door. Yeah, that opens so many doors.
So last year, I taught personally with assistant instructors in different states, but personally in front of me, taught 210 women and 10 men.
Wow.
97 of the women were concealed carry qualifiers, qualifying classes in different states. So almost half
It's amazing.
of them. And we taught in 9 different states, and we gave $12,000 away in financial aid. So the classes that we travel and do are free and reduced rate concealed carry qualification or level 1 fundamental classes um, for women that can't afford the training. So when we get women in class that can pay for class, that money goes back into our financial aid fund for women that can't. We're not going to deny any woman training because she's
It's like a Hippocratic oath. I like that.
Yeah, we're not going to deny any woman, but we prioritize giving funding to elders, typically on fixed incomes, a lot of times widows, um,
Single, more
single
vulnerable.
single mothers, and of course abuse survivors. Right, they're our biggest priority, are abuse survivors.
100. Yeah.
So when I can't get to an area to teach the class myself, then we find an instructor. She may not be a We the Female instructor, but it's an instructor that I know how they teach, and I know that they've got a different level of empathy to be able to work with these people. And then we will pay the instructor for the person that's needing the financial aid. And then two instructors, one in Texas and one in North Carolina, we went ahead and we gave them $1,000 each to have in their coffer. One of them is a Black female firearm instructor. She gets a lot of abuse victims through there. Another one is in Texas. So that they had the money for funding when they needed it, because I could trust them to do it too. Right.
Right. It's like an upfront kind of just a petty cash kind of piece. And
Well, only because I'd worked with them in the past on some things.
right, exactly. You try. They built that. Right. They built
Yeah.
that trust with you. Obviously,
Right.
this isn't just a. You're not just throwing out. Okay.
No,
The
no.
thing is, you're actually building the foundation, the structure behind it too.
I'm
And
building a
that's
community.
the
Yeah.
responsibility of it is what we should take on, is that part, because it's that stuff that gets overlooked, and that's
Yeah.
where it crumbles. Right.
Yeah. And well, it's too many people, right? And I get it, right? People do this because we want them to get paid, because it is how, for many of them, it's how they make their living, earn their living, and they should be able to get paid for it. A lot of times what they'll do is they'll discount their class for us, which helps as well. I don't get that money back. It just goes right back into the coffer for other classes to teach. So yeah, that's what we do. I taught in Chicago, Michigan, let's see, Georgia, Nevada, Arizona, California, Oregon, Washington. I'm missing somewhere. Tennessee. Last
Okay.
year.
And
Yeah.
I saw you on. I saw you in True Shot. I saw you do a True Shot show. That's my hometown ammo place. So
So, oh, you're in Chandler?
yeah, I'm in Arizona. I'm in
In
Phoenix, right
Arizona?
outside
Yeah.
Tempe. Yeah, so
Yeah.
I know
Good
those guys
partner.
well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we did with John Farner. He's a good friend of mine. He now works for Gun Owners of America, actually.
Excellent.
But John, was it the ammo? How to understand
Yes, the
ammo?
different
That was
ammos,
a
right?
fun video to do, right?
It looked like fun. And
The
you're like,
outtakes,
the
were
bullet
even
is the
funnier, actually.
projectile part. This
Yeah.
is
Well,
the
people don't
cartridge.
know.
I no,
People
no.
don't know.
And that's the point. This is not, and you're not, it wasn't belittling in any, it was,
No.
this is real terminology. So important. Clip, magazine,
Yeah.
all these things. These people, that's how the AR thing gets out, because they
Yeah.
get so scared because they don't understand the terminology.
Well, a lot of pro gun people don't know it.
Right.
A lot of a lot of gun owners don't know that your gun will say on the barrel or on the slide what caliber it is.
Albert, right.
And it
Exactly.
needs to match the bottom of the round of ammunition. Make sure they match before you put it in there. A lot of people don't know that.
Yeah.
So those are, I think we covered that in the video as well. But
Yes.
yeah, a lot
Yes,
of,
you certainly did.
yeah, they don't know that, so,
Right.
and of course, John and Kurt, who, he worked for them as well. He actually owns his own company now. TCRT Targets, which is going to be out of Arizona.
Okay,
They,
so that was Kurt, right? Because I think I met Kurt a couple years ago, maybe 2, 3. I remember them when they were out of this little corner before they were that new building that they're in. They were
yeah,
in around the corner in this little cutout thing that you had to walk up to, like just a little counter, and he just plopped. I got
yeah,
7.62 by 54R. I mean, we're
yeah.
talking like old
Before they
school.
had the big robot to build the boxes and all that stuff. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, and
yeah.
you get to walk in. So,
So,
but
but they knew it, right? They understood it, and they love what I do, and because they
yeah,
understand the gun industry. It's easy for the gun community to forget that they're probably 1% or less of gun owners in America, and that's not even getting into potential gun owners, right? I mean, it's actually the gun community and industry is actually, in the scheme of things, fairly small. And
is
because of that, the industry tends to forget those newbies a lot easier. And so of course John and Kurt understood that, which is why we made that video.
yeah, it's interesting. So,
Yeah.
well, so you have the We the Female.
I do.
You have this great training, this great piece.
Thank you.
We've been talking for an hour. I'm so grateful for
Have
your
we
time.
really?
Thank you so much for sharing. Well, the thing is, this thing should be called Time Warp, because it just literally is like a snap of the fingers. I think we could, you brought up 82 subjects. I know we could have a different topic talk about each subject for hours. So I'm respectful of your time. If you would like to share anything more you'd like, I'd love for that. Or if you just like to call it a night, I
Well, I'm okay for a
it's
few more minutes. I want to answer
great.
if any of your listeners have any questions. I'm happy. I can't. I don't have my reading glasses on. So
No
if you
worries.
pop
I'll
it
be
up
able
there,
to pull it up
I
for
mean,
you.
I can
Yeah.
put them
So
on, but
oh, they look great. All right. So
I'm
here.
at reading glass age now. I have glasses in every room. But yeah, if anybody's got questions for me, they're welcome to ask. But
Yeah.
and on that note, if anybody's got financial aid or has a request for financial aid, you can reach me at you instead of going through the website, you can go to wethefemaleofficial@gmail and email me brief description, super brief description about why it is that you're looking um, to why you need training. I don't need a financial statement. I don't need you to break it down. I'm not asking you to justify, but it only takes a few sentences. And within those sentences, I could tell if you're just looking for money or if you actually want training. So, and then we will help get you there. In fact, when I spoke at Gun Owners of America, I was on a panel with Nick Freitas and some Shermichael Singleton, some other. Shermichael's a good friend of mine from Guns.tv. But I mentioned it when I was on the panel at the Gun Owners of America, their goals convention last year. And I said, if you're watching and you need financial aid, and sure enough, we did have an elder. We had a 70-year-old lady reach out to us, and so we just got her financial aid and her training because she saw us talking about it on the panel. So you have is it a question here?
Yeah. So how do we teach the left that their only basic natural right is to defend themselves if they wish to stay alive?
Well,
So obviously the left is the one that would be the banning because we think, oh yeah, because like also obviously the criminals they're gonna also acquiesce and hand in their firearms too, right? For example,
so here's the thing. One of the failures on the part of the conservative side is facts over emotion, facts over emotion, facts over emotion. And they pound that in and they become assholes and complete lack of empathy and sympathy and all of those things. Well, first of all, we're talking about women, right? We just talked about that. We are not that we can't be logical. My daughter is a scientist um,
Oh,
and graduating
women are
college.
great, are the fire everything. Let's just we don't even need to argue. We don't even need to defend
Yeah. I mean, my
that.
daughter is very logical. She's probably more
Focus a
logical.
focused woman is greater than all. It is just not.
Which is
It's just
funny to
nothing
me
close.
that conservatives want to, that there's this whole trend of trying to silence them and take away their right to vote when the conservatives should be doing what the liberals did and weaponizing women for, they did it for gender ideology, right? But they need to do it for guns. In fact, I just posted about that earlier. I don't know if you saw it. I said, I dream of the day when women will fight for gun rights the way they did to keep men out of their bathrooms. Yeah.
I'm gonna have to repost that.
Yeah.
I've been in another podcast arguing Russia Ukraine. I apologize.
It's all good. It's all good. So understand that not only particularly getting to women, that's an important component of doing it, but also understand that we don't live in a fact-based society anymore, right? Our culture through social media has become emotionally driven. Everything is emotion. So for
What's
lack of
funny is Jordan Peterson, from Jordan Peterson's perspective, we look at the cultural move, right? That cultural progressiveness, but they did get it right. The world we live through a story.
right,
Humans live through a story, and when you logic that, it doesn't track. The story is what carries
right.
us through to the action.
And that's
Yeah.
what women are good at, right? We're
Right.
better,
Right.
honestly.
And to your point, this is exactly why this makes sense. Yeah.
So we need to use emotion and not get emotional. So I'm sure you probably knew I confronted Kamala Harris.
I did
Um,
not know this. Would you
yeah,
like to share that story?
well, if you go through my highlights of my media, you can probably find it. It was pinned. I had it pinned before the
Okay.
election, and I took it down now. Obviously, the election's over, but it went like you thought it would go. She had her people block me out completely and stuff. But the poignant moment wasn't when I confronted her. It was when she was running for president in 2020. And she'd come through Seattle on an anti-gun agenda. And the poignant moment was when I was in the restroom of this venue afterward, and I was washing my hands, and these two of her little followers were just gaga over her and going on wearing their little mom's demand shirts and all this. And all I said initially was, it's really unfortunate she wouldn't talk to a domestic violence victim about red flag laws. And they immediately went into their talking. But this was my aha moment, by the way.
Right,
This
because
was
you
before.
have to we have our cognitive dissonance too, right?
This was my aha moment of how this weapon works. So I'm not just telling you to talk out of my ass. I'm telling you because I know it fucking works. Okay. Um, and they immediately went into their talking points about, oh, well, this and making excuses for her. Well, she's busy, all these things. And I said, well, I was the domestic violence survivor she wouldn't talk to. And you could visibly see like the shield kind of come down in front of their eyes, right? They went like this. And then the conversation immediately turned to, oh my gosh, I am so sorry. I can't believe you went through that. That is awful. Are you okay? And, all of the feigned sympathy, right?
Right, because that's what they weaponize. They weaponize our compassion to
Right.
control
Right.
us,
And I
but they
said,
don't actually care about it. They don't have the
no.
compassion that they
And so I
weaponize.
said, well, what you guys don't understand is red flag laws can be used against me as a victim to keep me from being able to get a gun to defend myself from my abuser that's stalking me. I paraphrased. I'm
Right,
paraphrasing.
right.
Because it's been
You obviously understood this bit more than they certainly ever could.
I'm very well, like that's what I'm nationally known for, is red flag laws. I do talks all over the country on red flag laws. Like I used to work for John Lott at Crime Prevention Research Center, and that was one of my
So,
specialties.
can you explain just for a general population, what is a red flag law?
I'll come back to that. So
Okay.
what they immediately froze when I said that to them. They literally nonplussed, slack jaw, and I walked out and left them just in silence. And an ABC reporter actually followed me out. Apparently, it was in the bathroom. I didn't know it, and she followed me out. Oh no, I recorded that just in case she wanted to try something, but fortunately, she didn't. But as I processed that information on my way home, I realized that their need to show me their empathy, right, to show me their virtue signaling,
Virtual, I
was
just yeah.
was more important than what they perceived to be their facts. So fast forward a couple of weeks, and one of I would even call her feminazi. I would say that she's probably not as bad now. She would be one of the feminists on the left that when the gender stuff went out of control, she'd have been like, okay, this is getting crazy. So she wasn't so far left that she was radicalized, but she was pretty close. She didn't like guns.
Right.
And she knew I had a gun, but I wasn't a crazy gun person, right? That's the other advantage women have in this space is, right? The NRA is demonized white males, not the NRA, but the gun control lobbyists, right? Because who does the NRA represent? Predominantly white men, right? White adult men. And whereas a woman isn't looked at quite like that.
And I don't even
So
know if the NRA is more controlled opposition than they are actual for trying to protect those rights, but that's a whole
that's a
other.
whole other
It's
podcast.
a
But
that's a deeper
yeah,
podcast.
so uh,
Anyway, yeah.
she
So
she so she was in my salon one day, and it was actually my day off, and I popped in there because I'd come back from, I was out, actually I'd gone on a run, and I popped in there to grab something. I don't remember what it was. But underneath my thin shirt from running, because it was in the spring, it was warm, she could see the print of my gun. And she says, well, what's that? Oh, let me back up because I forgot a huge piece of this. I was giving her a facial one day, and I had just given a speech. So this was in December of 2019. And I had just given a speech in November of 19 on the Capitol lawn in DC,
okay.
where I told and I didn't want to stand up there and say what everybody else was saying. I wanted to emotionally get people involved. And I did. In fact, I made Dick Heller cry, and Dick Heller and I are good friends now. It's a different story too, but I made him cry with my story. So I told some of the stuff I had mentioned today, right, about like the physical stuff I went through and things. And so I let her listen to this speech while I was doing her facial. She wanted to listen to it. And she got to hear the details of what happened to me and how I was beat up. And it pissed her off, right? She's a feminist, right? She's a, at that time would have been classified a feminazi. And she goes, I would have fucking shot him. And remember, she doesn't like guns. And I looked at her. I paused in the middle of this facial, and I looked down at her, right, because she's laying on a bed, and she looked up at me, and I said, would you? And she realized what she said, right? And she really thought of it. She was a very intelligent woman. She worked in tech, like she's a very smart lady. And she realized what she said, and she says, yeah, I think I would have. I said, now do you understand why guns are important to women? And I just let it go, right? Because that's the key. You got to let it go. Don't keep pushing them, right? Because the minute you push back on
Has
anybody,
to process.
you let
They
them
have to break.
process and let them come back to you, and they will. So this is what happened. So a couple weeks later, I come in and she sees my gun. She goes, what's going on? I said, "What's my gun?" I had it on a belt, like a support belt for running, belly band. And I said, "Do you want to see it?" And she said, "I do." So I pulled it out and I cleared it, took the magazine out, locked the slide back, and I handed it to her. And it was just a little P238, little 380, SIG 380.
Okay, 380. Yep.
That I run with. Anything I carry bigger when I'm actually out every day, but when I'm running, it's just a smaller one's easier. And it was first time, she was 55 years old. It's first time she touched a gun in her life. And I put it in her hand and she said, "I could shoot this."
Because
So
that person is a boss. That's
yeah,
why.
yeah. So what you have to do is you have to plant the seed. So, and this is all part of like anecdotes to your listeners' question, right?
Yeah,
Plant the
for sure.
seed and then let them ask questions. The minute that you see that they're having struggle comprehending or that they want to be combative, and sometimes they don't even realize it, right? Because you have messed up, as we call in the industry, the OODA loop, right? Like they have this expectation of response that they're going to give to you for your response,
Right.
right? This is, and
Right. Well,
you
they're in the echo chamber where it's all that same circular thing. There's nothing outside of
and
that
you
that they can
totally
even.
cracked it, right? So respect that and be conscious of that, right?
Yeah.
Back off. Change the subject. You'll keep your friendship too doing that.
Absolutely.
But I promise you, if you approach it that way, they will come back to you when they have the next question, when there's the next this or the next that. And they're going to come back at you oftentimes, especially if it's something violent like a shooting, especially they're going to come back at you violent, right? Well, how can you explain this? Or how come you just can't understand this? And then you just plant another seed.
Mm-hmm.
And then the minute that they get like, walk away again, walk away again.
Yeah.
So it's a marathon. It's not a sprint, but I promise you can get them. You may not get them to completely get rid of or supporting getting rid of any gun control right away, but you will get them out shooting and you will get them to soften on a lot of things. It's just you have to be willing to commit to doing it. That's why a lot of times online, I used to go after everybody constantly because I was tagged constantly and stuff
Oh yeah.
when I first
From
started.
all sides, I can
Yeah,
imagine.
and it was exhausting. And now, and I used to fight it constantly, and I'm a very combative personality just because I just won't put up with bullshit. And I had to really like consciously step back and realize reading when people are writing stuff or typing things or whatever, whether or not they're realistically going to listen or not, you know. And I can tell within the first paragraph typically, or first sentence usually, whether they're actually
Sure.
going to stop and be willing to listen to what I'm saying. And if they're not, I'm not going to waste my time. But
Yeah.
but I've actually flipped people even online with some of the stuff. But if I can get them in my
I
classroom,
do too, and it's funny because like what I'll do is I'll give somebody 2 responses, then I know whether it's a troll or not, but I'll
yeah,
give them the courtesy because you
yeah.
never know if it's a misunderstanding or something, so I give them 2, and then I know.
We always
And
go by the
then
two
but
rule. Yeah.
right, and I've got friends, like, on Facebook that are fraternity brothers or something through college, and I'm trying to be completely, like, defang the government in a general sense, and everyone I'm saying taxation is theft, and they're saying rich should pay their share, and I'm like, "Okay, listen to yourself. You're
Right.
defending taxes.
Right.
Stop." Okay,
Yeah.
and then we get in this weird back and forth to your point, I go, "Brother, I love you, man do me a favor. I'm going to step back because I'm not connecting with you the way
Yeah.
that is. I did share this here. If you take a look, the person jumped on one of the live chats. He's like, "Oh my gosh, I didn't even know this or that." And now he's open. Now I'm open to an idea he's willing to share. And it just does open that
Yeah, when
floodgate the
you
right
back
way.
off of it, you don't look like the crazy, gun in my space here. You're, oh, she's actually somebody I could go to about this because she's not the crazy NRA white guy.
Right.
Kind of a thing.
XYZ. Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. Which
And
I am the crazy white guy, but still, it's okay.
yeah, and that works. So to answer that question, that's what you do. So what I like to say is that was a very long way of saying be a resource. Don't be an enemy. And
Yes.
if they're not going to get it, they're not going to get it, right? And don't waste your time.
Yeah.
Like, and you don't have to waste your time, and nor do you have to keep going with them. If you can tell that they're not going to get it, just walk away. Save your own headache. But if you can be a resource to them, they will get there eventually.
Yeah.
And yeah,
I always equate like arguments like everyone the person that you're approaching is a deer. You don't shove food in their face. You slowly open your hand and you slowly hold it out and let them come to you and they will come. They will come. The trust will be built as long as you're not too forceful and
yeah. But if you try to get too
you can
excited to feed them, then they're going to run away.
exactly.
So
That's true.
yeah.
So that's where
Any
we're
other
at.
questions that your listeners have?
Let's see. Well, I'll share one more here before we call it a night.
Yeah.
How do we bring back political discourse in an age of overly emotional tribalism?
You don't. You're just not going to. For all
Do you think we're 50-50 in this country and it's going to be this
100%.
way pretty
What
much?
I travel around the country, right? I travel to all
Right.
different states. I've got a pretty good temperature on all states. It's not going to happen.
Do
Social
you not see
media,
a reconciliation?
social. As of with currently, I would say no. Ask me that
I
question
would
again in 4 years, but I don't think so. I think it's going to get worse.
right, and I'm not and it's interesting because I do have a couple of thoughts about the Trump thing because um it almost felt like the fever broke. He won the election. There wasn't too much uproar about it. It was just like, okay. And then here's Obama and him chuckling in the funeral, the
Yeah.
same guy who they just called a dictator and a Nazi and Hitler or whatever. And you're just like, clearly they let it go. So like I'm wondering if that broke enough fever, not to fix
No,
it yet.
they
There's a
let it
lot of
go
work
so that
ahead.
they looked like they did exactly what they did, and you could tell by that we're going to make sure this gets. We're better than conservatives, right? They
Mhm.
went about it the wrong way because they went about it attacking conservatives. We're better than conservatives. We're going to transfer power peacefully. We're not the kind of people, right? They still played the piety card.
Right, right. Still do it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and
So
they're still doing that. So yeah.
and but I'm just wondering because to your point, I truly think the trans agenda with parents really shifted the needle this time. I don't think anybody wanted a male to beat up their daughter. I just think that like that was at least part of the line, if not just the abuse of children with hormones and all that. Just that alone, once the children are touched, that's when
Yeah.
this seemed to have cracked or
Yeah, because
broken
they
in the
pissed off the moms. Yeah, they pissed off the
yeah.
women. But also
And women are what
inflation didn't
80%
help.
decision maker in the household
Yeah.
and certain things like that, you know.
Inflation didn't help. That was, definitely.
No, no, certainly not, but then we would have seen a little bit bigger difference in 2022. You know what I mean? There was just that red wave was like a puddle, a
Yeah.
drip, and then this was just it was a landslide. It
Well,
was a
the
landslide.
thing that really did it was the illegals.
Yeah.
That's the
Yeah,
one
that
thing
put it
that
over
I
the
think a
top for
lot of
sure, yeah.
liberals are
I
like,
mean,
okay, this is getting ridiculous.
how many things were they just on the wrong side of? It's just unbelievable.
Yeah, yeah. The
It's
illegals, I
so
think,
bad.
was the big every poll you saw. It was always the illegals, inflation, and the trans agenda were the three things that screwed them over, and they continue to stand 10 toes down on it and bit them in the ass. And that's where you're seeing people like um, Bill Maher, who's a staunch liberal, still hates Trump, but he's like, yeah, here's why they won, right?
Yep.
Because and he says, and they're going to if and he says, and he I just watched something from him not too long ago that somebody sent me, where he's like, the Democrats are still on their Democrat crap and the liberals, and he said they didn't get it. They did not get it. They're still going after Trump, and this is why they're going to lose again in 2 years if they do not get their shit together. And yeah, so a lot of them are getting it. Sank, right? That Turk, the guy that runs Young Turks, he's obviously getting it. He's waking up.
And yeah, Chank's I think he's a little following that Skrilla.
Oh, I don't trust him for
Yeah,
anything.
he's
But
I've been following Cenk for a long time, so
he has a voice, and
yes, he certainly does have a voice. There's no
he's
doubt.
got people hearing him. You know,
Yep,
and I can
he
see it,
does.
the temperature in his comments and stuff. How they're like, yeah, we
Yeah,
got to.
well, Anna Kasparian's the same thing. She completely I mean, she's like, I am Republican now. Like, I am
Yeah,
voting Trump. That's like Cenk's like, right hand person or whatever.
yeah,
So
yeah. So
yeah.
it's no we're not a democracy, but no democracy or we're based, we have an element of democracy in how we run this country, but there's never been one that's lasted more than 250 years, and that's going to be right about the time of the end of Trump's presidency. So it's kind of interesting. As
Literally in the
somebody
middle of it, 26, right? Exactly. Yeah.
married to
So
a historian, U.S. historian, and I've been I've studied and written about history now for a while. So we watch this from a very historic perspective, and I'll be real curious to see what's going to happen in 4 years, because we may not even Trump. Had Trump not gotten elected, I think it would have happened. I think we'd have been screwed 100%.
yeah,
Um,
I
and I'm
honestly
not a
think
Trump
that was a
supporter.
problem.
I voted
Yeah.
for him, but I'm not a MAGA person at all.
Right.
In fact, I wasn't
Thank
going
you for sharing that.
I wasn't going to vote for a president. Actually, I was going to leave my vote blank until I went and saw Ian Carroll and what's the name of that other
I
guy?
love Ian.
Yeah, I've gotten a chance
With
to.
Luke Rakowski or
No, we were
Clint Russell, Dave
no,
Smith,
no.
Jimmy Dore.
Oh, stop.
Ian Carroll's with everybody.
Never mind. You're making it worse. So now I can't remember who it is. So anyway, I met him and another guy at the Old State Saloon in Idaho. And I stopped in there on my way to go teach in Washington State. And Ian was there, and this other guy that works in educating about trafficking situations, the illegals and trafficking.
Oh, O'Keefe? James O'Keefe?
No, it wasn't James. I met
Oh,
James. I went to James's party, and boy,
right.
the trip.
That was a fun little time, huh?
Yeah, James is an interesting character. But
Anyway, Ian. So
yeah, well, Ian and this other guy, I can't remember the other guy's name. Anyway, they did this whole talk on trafficking and human trafficking and so on, and on the children. And what we thought we understood about it versus what is realistic is disturbing. So by the end of this year, the estimate is that there's 500,000 missing children coming across these borders from the illegals. And the one thing that I can praise Trump for in his last administration, there's many things, to be honest, but the one thing that he really did well is he was actually very effective at starting to shut down some of these trafficking rings. And it was even more toward the end of his administration, the year 4, that he was more active with this. In fact, I posted about it, and I had a liberal gal that follows me on my personal Facebook page, and she says, "Can you send me that data?" And I'm like, right, all from like,
wait, it's already in your inbox. What are you
I'm like,
talking about?
yeah, here's the news articles. Here's the .gov, right, from the FBI. Here's the Department of Justice exposing this. Here's this. I sent it all to her, and all she was, "Thank you for being willing to send that." And I wanted to say, "Thank you." I said, because I knew she thought she had a gotcha, because it was kind of snide. She goes, "Can I have that information?" I'm like, you bet you can.
Yeah, would you like the Haiti adoption agency information while we're at it? Would you
Yeah,
like that
get it over
too?
that.
Oh, let's do it. Let's do all of them. Let's do every single sex
Yeah,
trafficking ring that's going on out there, because they're there, people.
yeah,
It sucks. It
yeah.
hurts to
Well,
tell you because it makes you sound like a crazy person, but it's
it
true.
wasn't that she didn't think it existed. She didn't think that Trump had actually done anything. And I'm like, actually,
Oh,
he's
right.
the one that had actually done it. So when I
Right.
saw that talk, and I knew that already about Trump, right? Because I'd followed that for a while. And then I saw that talk, and I realized if anybody can help these children, it's would be the Trump administration. And so reluctantly, I wasn't going to vote for Kamala. Like, I'm not voting for a woman because she's a woman, right? That was the libertarians. One of their biggest mistakes was picking that idiot Jo Jorgensen. I shouldn't say that. She wasn't an idiot, but she was a terrible choice. And they tried to pull the Hillary Clinton, I'm
Horrible
with her
choice and
card.
representative. Spike was done wrong. Spike would have been a better
Spike was screwed.
representative
You know
for
who
the
else?
libertarians.
Yeah, it was. Yeah. So anyway, I was insulted as a woman that they expected, that they tried to pull that liberal Democrat card with me, right? So I wasn't voting.
I'm a man. I'm going to vote for a woman, and don't think that women aren't the
And
good guys because
I'm a
I
real
work on
feminist.
carburetors.
Well, I'm a real feminist. I'm not a feminazi.
Right.
I'm a real feminist because I
Right.
understand
You're an
history.
empowerment of women.
100%.
You're like almost. I mean, do you like a Camille Paglia at all? Like, because it seems like she's one of those empowerment type women. It's like, be Amelia Earhart. That's the kind of women we want. The empowered woman. You know.
Abigail Adams was the country's first feminist. So, by today's standards, everybody worships the founding fathers and the founding mothers. But if people, conservatives, actually read some of the things that Abigail Adams wrote to her nieces and other women, they would call her a feminazi extremist. No, That's how progressive she was about women's rights at a time when women had no rights, none.
Right.
Women were literally bought and sold for marriage, right? Not as slaves, but it was right as political deals or advancing their families or whatever, right?
Right.
Everything came with a
And
price.
that is an absolute dark time in all of history. Is
It is what it
that
is. I
was
mean, it's really
yeah.
only been modern history, if you think about it, that women have had any sort of choice in who they
Hmm.
marry. I mean, they did to a certain degree back then. Um,
Yes.
to a certain degree, but it wasn't like it was legal that they bought and sold them. It was right if they were of prominence, it was done from a place of strengthening families, right? Or
Right.
this,
Dowries and whatnot. And you had all these other
right?
types.
And if it was the poor families, it's they did it to try to survive, So, but women were definitely chattel, out there, and she was very much about the importance of women being educated and women being. I've actually studied Abigail and John Adams enough that I got my tour of Peacefield for free because I knew more than the curator of the museum. On my 49th birthday, they gave me a full tour. It was a
You're like,
fully
we're
booked tour.
walking. You're
They let me in for free into a full tour, which they normally don't do because the house is so old and everything in it is still old from because 4 generations of Adams lived there. And so, and the library and everything that's there. So they're very protective, and all of his letters and her letters are in that library. What's not in Library of Congress, but
right. Right.
uh, yeah, so they only allow so many people in at a time, but they actually let me in and gave me my tour for free. But that was kind of fun. But I could actually write a valid book on why Abigail Adams is the real reason the Declaration of Independence got written. So
I love that. You should do
yeah,
it.
I've thought about it. A lot of people have encouraged me to, but he didn't really do anything unless, sorry, my eyes itching, allergies. He didn't really do anything without her talking to her. When he was president, as an insult to John, they called Abigail Mrs. President. A lot of people don't know that.
I
So
love that.
because she had that much
Like
influence over.
Wilson's wife
Well, she had to
towards
run
the
shit.
end.
Yeah, well, she had to run everything, and you would never know that, right?
Yeah, because of the
Yeah,
stroke.
yeah. Watch
All that.
if you like drunk history, y'all. Watch if you can find it. Go back and find drunk. I loved drunk history, but
Drunken history, right? So there's so
great
much
show,
fun.
man. But
And then he ran and down the street, and then
it
he
was
was like,
awesome, man. My daughter would come home from school, and while other kids were watching cartoons or whatever, right? Their little sitcoms, their kid,
right.
tween and teen. She was watching Drunk History. It was great, but
Oh, that's great.
there was one on her, Edith, and it's Courtney Cox plays her. And
Mm.
it's great. And one of my favorite lines is she is looking at me. She's handing these papers, and they're starting to get suspicious. She's like, "I'm just a dumb broad. What do I know?" It was just super. It's just funny how that struck me. But I love that show, and they do a whole series of first ladies. The Dolly Madison one is also funny because Dolly Madison was a partier, man. So and that was her power was her social skills, So
Well,
anyway,
I grew up in Philadelphia, so I got every tour of every single Ben Franklin thing and every single thing around
Ben Franklin
Philadelphia,
was
the
not a
Bell.
good person. Actually, he was actually kind of a
No,
yeah. He
he just was
abandoned his
a
wife. He abandoned his children. He was chasing. It was like
I think it was
not cool.
about prestige. He just loved being loved or something, whatever
Yeah,
that
well,
was.
that
But
wasn't even so. No, that was John Hancock. Boy, John Hancock was not the hero that everybody thinks he is. He ended up having
his
to.
signature kind of gives it away, doesn't it? The size of it just alone tells you how much
Actually
of a
had nothing to do
megalomaniac.
with that. The only reason his signature was so big on that was because he was the first to sign it, and he didn't know. It was
Oh, how that
yeah, and nobody. There was only one other witness there when he signed it, actually, surprisingly enough. So, no, he was an aristocrat, and he loved his status and he loved his money, and he didn't want to get rid of any of it. And but essentially, Sam Adams, who they hated each other, by the way, they couldn't stand each other, put him in a position and forced his hand to not have a choice. So then he started to
So
become
Hancock was not really he was not
not initially, no,
complicit in initially, okay.
not
Because
initially.
back then, treason was death, right? I mean, a lot of these
Yeah,
aristocrats were speaking out against treason. I mean, again, doing
yeah.
treasonous acts, so they were gonna lose
Well, that
everything if
wasn't
they
even
lost.
it for him. For him, it was his livelihood, right? He
Right.
made millions. The dude owned what we now know as the state of Maine. Like John Hancock's he owned that land that was a just territory at that point. He owned that. It's now the state of Maine. Like he was one of the wealthiest people. Like without that's a rabbit hole we can go down. But long story short, John Hancock would have well, none of them really wanted to leave the Union. They wanted to stay subject. They were, their hand was forced. But John Hancock made his money from the British, right? I mean, that was on trade. And so he, of all of them, and he loved the status of that, right? He was big on the status that he got. He attended King George's coronation. A lot of people don't realize that. He was actually at King George's coronation. He was a very powerful aristocrat. And he had a couple of shitty things happen because of the British, sanctions and taxes, blah, blah. I'm totally trying to keep this short because this is
no worries. I'm loving it. So please.
But if my battery dies on my phone, I hope it doesn't. But long story short, a bunch of shit happened, and Sam Adams kind of publicly pushed him into a situation where it put him in a situation where he had no choice.
Right.
He essentially had to do this, or he was going to get screwed either way. And,
right. Yeah, he kind of put him in there because he's getting implicated or something in some way or another, so he might as well be all in and put his weight behind it.
When his British contacts and concierges and things didn't really support it, he was like, well, I guess I'm all in now. Is the short of it, right? But he was buried initially in an unmarked grave, and his wife was not very he wasn't as well loved as people want to perceive that he was. He's an interesting character to study, but he was not the hero. Neither was George Washington. Actually, was if you want to talk about it in another podcast sometime, I'm happy to. But George Washington was, if you actually study him, a lot of the reason he wanted to do this and become the Duke and to secede was because of his bruised ego from the French Indian Wars. So, like, I wouldn't be surprised. Look, I don't give you highlights and dates. I can tell you the whys behind everything.
Not all capes wear heroes. What can I say, Kerry?
Yeah. I mean, he got there and he was obviously passionate about it, but some of it was ego driven for him, and I'm okay.
Oh, did we lose yet? I think we may have lost you. So, Kerry Slone, thank you so much. It looks like your phone had just died. Maybe we'll get you back. Everyone, thank you so much for joining. I hope that we didn't lose her, but I think we lost her. So, Kerry, thank you again. Slows and Shotguns, the real SNS on the X. So we will actually have. Hey, I'm wondering, Zach, maybe we should do a League of Ordinary Gentlemen. We'll have Kerry come on and talk about this George Washington story that she just teased us with. So thank you again, Kerry, for joining us. Thank you, everyone in the Not Conscious community. What we have tomorrow is, so I have been on an absolute whirlwind. I've done 12 podcasts in 14 days. Today was number 11, and I did two. I did two today. So I am just on fumes, and Zach is like, absolutely, let's do it. So what we'll do is we'll have Kerry come on when she's available again. She'll tell us some cool stories. I think this was such a fun conversation. I didn't even know which way it was going to go. I was hoping to hear about her stuff, and she started sharing about this awesome story. So tomorrow we've got Consciously Unmasked with my friend Jason. And then I think in a few weeks, we've got, once again, the League of Ordinary Gentlemen, episode 2 with Andrew, Zach, Jason, and Sean and myself, I think. So we'll probably have a little fun with that. And then tomorrow, like I said, Consciously Unmasked, that is at 5 p.m. Arizona time, 7 p.m. Eastern. Thank you, everyone, to everyone who watched my previous conversation with Andy Semichuk. Specifically, Zach, for just hanging out, man. I really appreciate it. Like, I just see your name up there and I feel like some support. So thank you. Giving me wings, bro. Give him or wind or something. Probably giving me the wings because mine are breaking. But tomorrow will be podcast number 12 over a 14-day stretch. Plus my job. I am just so exhausted. Thank you again. I will be on Monday for Provoked and then next Thursday again. But tomorrow, Jason will be there 7 p.m. Thank you again. Oh, hold on. We added. Oh, there she is. I was able to hold off. Hi, welcome.
Sorry, my battery died.
There we go. No, we were wondering that. So this it unfortunate break, but it's been such a great conversation. I just spoke with Zach. We have a panel of a few people. We would love to have you come on and share some of these stories about George Washington and stuff. So
Sure.
we'll reach out on the sidelines. I will connect you with some of my other friends because we have Venn diagrams and this is a community. My
Yeah.
job is to get every person that has seen me plus just one more from one of their people. So that's all we're here to do is just spread the message because the message is so
Well,
valuable. Before you call it a night, please share everything. Thank you again so much for your
oh,
time,
thank
Kerry.
you for having me on. I've had fun, and I'd love to talk history with y'all. So, um, especially women's Revolutionary War history. That's my specialty. Women and
Amen. Let's do it.
but
We're
you
up
can
for that.
find me at wethefemale.org or .net, either one. I have both of those websites. You can find me on Instagram at wethefemale_official, and Stilettos and Shotguns 3.0. I saw that history nerd wants to know more. I got you.
That's what we're gonna do. So
I might make you angry sometimes. Like I've actually pissed off a few people by telling
you
history.
won't. Zach's a good friend of mine, and
Good.
he's on our panel. He's the one who wants to hear it. So maybe I'll connect you two to do one, and
Sure.
we'll just
You can
grow
give
it.
my,
We'll just
yeah,
gonna be
you can
fun. Yeah.
we the female official at Gmail. Just email me. But yeah, because I've actually talked about that. I've some people got mad at me when I'm like kind of like the John Hancock thing. I'm like, sometimes sometimes the history isn't as glamorous as like
Well, there's nuance. Like I knew who the guy was 200 years ago. Like I'm sorry, I don't. I just
right.
don't.
Yeah,
You know.
exactly. So we the female, so Stilettos and Shotguns 3.0 on Instagram. The real underscore SNS on X. That's where I'm most active because they don't censor me. You can also find me Stilettos and Shotguns and We the Female on Facebook. And feel free to DM me if you listen to this tonight and you want to DM me on X. You're welcome to do so. I'm happy to take any messages that you got. It takes me a day or two sometimes to get to them because I do get a lot. And if you know somebody or if you have any ladies listening that need financial aid for training, please don't hesitate to reach out to us. If you would like to donate to what we do, you can find us at Give, Send, Go. I have a link pretty much everywhere. You could find, or you can go to our website, wethefemale.org, and there's a PayPal link there that you can donate as well. 100% of all of the funds that come in through donations go right back into our financial aid for women that can't afford it. So thank you, Mark, for having me on.
Thank you
Appreciate
so
it.
much.
And y'all have a
Thank
good
you. Yeah. Have a great night. Let me hit stop and then we'll talk to offline for 1 second. But thank you again. We are going to talk so much. I think we're just going to have fun whenever you have time to just jump on with us and we'll talk. So thank you again, everyone. Kerry Slone. Check out wethefemale.net, wethefemale.org. Good night, everybody.